Hey there, everyone, and welcome to Pour and Explore, a wine, food, and travel podcast. I'm your host, Nick Elliott, the wine guy. I'd love to be your go-to guide for all things wine, food, and the amazing places they take us. Here on Pour and Explore, we'll sip, savor, and wander through the exciting world of wine, discuss incredible cuisines, and uncover the stories behind unforgettable destinations. Each week, I'll bring you lively conversations with wine experts, chefs, travel pros, and fellow enthusiasts. We'll share practical tips, hilarious tales, and plenty of inspiration to fuel your next adventure. So grab a glass, pull up a chair, and join me as we pour, explore, and celebrate the good life. Let's dive in. All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Pour and Explore, the podcast where we sip, savor, and stroll our way through the world of wine, food, and travel. I'm Nick Elliott, the wine guy, chef, certified sommelier, former winemaker. Happy to be with you today, and we are talking about something today that's part science, part magic, and often misunderstood. That is the aging of wine. And not only today are we going to talk about what that means, we're going to talk about what happens in the bottle during the aging process, what wines to look into aging, and what wines you don't need to bother aging, as well as a little bit of a food chat at the end of the episode. So I really appreciate you joining me, and if you are someone who has ever thought about sitting on some wine for a while, this is a great episode for you. Or if you just like to understand why we do it and how we do it and so on, this again is the episode for you. I'll start off this way. You do not need to start with a 3,000 bottle cellar to enjoy wine that improves over time. As a matter of fact, you can start with just a little closet in your house. Hey, that's what the wine guy does. I've got a little closet in my hallway that temperature stays pretty stable, and that's where I store my wine. I'm going to tell you how to do it. Today we're going to talk about wines that are age-worthy, how to store them, and even if you're not fancy, and have the room for the wine, the wine has its own bedroom. You do not need that to do it the right way. So with that being said, let's pour into it. Why are we aging wine at all? So let's talk about the why to begin with. Most wines, admittedly, are made to be enjoyed young, just a couple of years old. About 90% of wines sold in the US are consumed within the first 48 hours of purchase. And of those, most of those wines are only a few years old. If you actually look at the vintage on the bottle, that's the year that you find on the bottle. For those of you who do not know, it's 2025. You're going to see 2024, 2023, 2022, etc., etc. You go to a nice wine shop, the ones that they've got on the top shelf or locked behind the closet, those are going to be a little bit older, 2000, 2005. 2015, all of those things. Those are wines that are going to be aged already for you. So you don't necessarily need to deal with it, that aging point, because they're ready to drink right away. But as a hobbyist, someone who does like aging wine, to see the differences over time, listen in, because that's what we're here to do. During the aging process, the right bottle, can transform it from good to great. And the reason that that's happening is that inside the bottle during that aging process in your home or at the wine shop, we are developing more complex flavors. We are developing softer tannin, so it's not so drying in the mouth. We're developing more earthy or savory notes within the bottle rather, and we are developing a longer, more elegant finish in most wines. Think about I wanted to say stew. Think about a stew, but I'm a chili guy, and my chili trophies in the background there. I'm a chili guy, and I will never eat chili on the same day that I make it. I always make my chili 1 to 2 to 3 days ahead of time, because what's happening is over time, even in the refrigerator as it sits to wait to be reheated, it is developing interesting flavors. It's developing, everything's coming together. It's allowing those flavors to come together beautifully for the final product. And that is what we're doing in the bottle over an extended period of time. The longer it simmers, the longer it's allowed to do its thing, the better it will get. So just a little bit of an analogy there for you. But I will say that not all wines benefit from aging. So how do you know what to age? Let's get into that first. Wines that age well have certain key traits to them. And these are the key traits that we were looking for in a wine that is going to age well. We're looking for wines with high acidity. Acidity is like the spine of the wine. It holds the wine up over time. So wine with good acidity is always going to age better than what we refer to as flabby wines. The industry wines that don't have very high acidity have a very high pH level where they're more creamy than they are acidic. Wines with high tannin, especially in the red category. The wines with high tannins, things like Cabernet Sauvignon, is a great example of this. Wine with very, very high tannin, and those tannins are going to soften over time and they will mellow with age. This is why Cab is so sought after, especially ones that, are coming from the Napa Valley region or from the Bordeaux region, higher in acidity, and wines that we can lay down. Another term that I'll teach you today is lay down, which is just another way of saying putting it in your cellar and allowing it to age for a bit. So wines that we can lay down, like Cabernet Sauvignon, are going to be great examples of age-worthy wines. Wines that have a good alcohol level and sugar level. Both alcohol and sugar can act as preservatives in the wine. Dessert wines are a great example of this. Dessert wines and fortified wines tend to age better. That's why we can get a 10, 20, 40-year-old port wine, for example, high alcohol level. That's going to last for a long, long time in the bottle. And then we are looking for wines with really good balance as well. And the key is the harmony between all of these things that I just mentioned. And these are all going to be key traits of wines that will age very, very well in your cellar / closet / pantry, wherever you're keeping it. And we'll talk more about that in a bit. But examples of wines that are going to age well on the red side, I've already mentioned Cabernet Sauvignon. Perfect. Nebbiolo, that is a grape from northern Italy, and some examples of Nebbiolo are going to be Barolo or Barbaresco. These are both made with Nebbiolo. Syrah, Shiraz, same thing. Syrah from everywhere else in the world, and Shiraz from Australia. They are going to age really, really well. Rioja wines, wines from that region of Spain, especially Reserva Riojas and Gran Reserva Riojas. Say that 3 times fast. They are going to age very, very well. Again, I mentioned Bordeaux earlier. Bordeaux blends, wines with a Cabernet Sauvignon or a Merlot base to them, coming from the Bordeaux region of France, are also going to last a long time laying down and get better with age. And one of my favorites, Brunello di Montalcino, is going to be another example of what we're talking about. Now, a lot of people say that you don't necessarily want to age white wine, and I would say for the most part this is true. But I'm going to give you a quick short list of wines, white wines, that do age well, things that you can keep for an extended period of time. I'm not going to give you specific amounts of time with any of these because it really does change vintage to vintage, region to region, things like that. These are all just very, very general guidelines. when it comes to the wines that I'm recommending. Riesling is going to start off this list, especially Riesling from Germany. Spotless Riesling is a great example. Ostless Riesling is a great example of a white wine that you can sit down for an extended period of time and it will get better with age. White Burgundy, Chardonnay coming from the Burgundian region of France, the Burgundy region of France. Very, very high acidity typically. And these are wines that are going to lay down for a good amount of time, a couple of years at least. Chenin Blanc. Chenin Blanc is a wine no matter where you get it, from which region. It's always going to have nice acidity, a really, really strong backbone. It's one of the heavier whites, and over time, Chenin Blanc will age very, very well. Of course, we can't talk about white wine without talking about champagne. So vintage champagne is another great example. You can find champagnes on the market now from the 90s, in the 2000s, some of the vintage champagnes. If you can get your hands on one, fantastic. It can also be laid down for quite a bit and be really, really good in the finished product. You always want to reach out and, who you buy it from. That person, that company, that store is hopefully going to know a little bit more about it. And this goes for everything that I'm talking about, all of the wines that I'm talking about today. Get their advice on how long you can lay it down for. There are some general rules, some general guidelines for that thing. If you can't talk to anyone, you know what? Go to Google, go to ChatGPT and ask them. I've got a 1999 Brunello di Montalcino from this winery. I just bought it from a store. How much longer will it last if I keep it shelf stable in my home? And you should get a pretty accurate answer from those places. Tokai is another wine that I would recommend to lay down for a bit. It goes along with the dessert wines that I was talking about earlier. This is a Hungarian wine made from a grape called Ferment. And Tokai is a dessert wine that, because of its acidity and because of its sugar level, is going to lay down and age extremely well when taken care of. So that's a list of wines that do well with some aging. Now I'm going to give you a list of wines that you should not lay down for an extended period of time, and this is what people are referring to. Most of the things on this list are white wines, of course. Rosé, rosé of any kind. You want to drink rosé within a year or two of it being bottled. So from that vintage year that you see on the bottle, you want to drink it within a couple of years of that year. Most Sauvignon Blanc is going to be another wine that you want to drink pretty quickly after it was harvested and after it was bottled. Same thing goes for Pinot Grigio. Definitely is going to be something that you want to consume pretty quickly. And then we move over to the red side, and the list is very, very short, but a good example of a red wine that you want to drink pretty immediately is Beaujolais Nouveau. You've heard me talk about that on the show before, hopefully, and Beaujolais Nouveau is going to be something that you want to drink right away because it's meant to be consumed right away. And then as a general rule, I'd like to say that any inexpensive wines under, let's say, the $15 mark is likely not built to last. You're buying at Trader Joe's, you're buying at the grocery store, which of course I don't recommend. Even from your wine shop, if it's under $15, go ahead and drink that with dinner that night because it's likely not going to hang out for very long. That should give you a really good idea of at least where to start with the aging of wine or the not aging of wine. So let's talk now about what happens in the bottle while a wine sits back and ages. Very specifically, this time we are talking about the fruity notes in wine. Fruity notes in wine, if we're thinking about, fresh cherries or fresh raspberries, that smell. Everyone can imagine the smell of a clamshell of raspberries when they pull it out of the refrigerator, and you know that smell. Now, think about that same fruit aroma developing into dried raspberries or cooked raspberries. The smell changes, right? And that is what is going to happen over time. Those flavors are going to evolve into dried fruit flavors or leathery aromas, maybe some tobacco, mushroomy, honey notes as well. And then, of course, the oaky flavors that are imparted onto the wine during the barreling process. The vanilla flavors, for example, are going to mellow, and the oaky notes are going to mellow, and those are going to start morphing into nutty flavors or the aromas of baking spices. Think about the smell of cooking apple pie, in grandma's kitchen. Those are the aromas that we are going to start picking up. Tannins are going to start softening during that process, as I mentioned earlier, and what is happening is those tannins, they're polymerizing. They are linking up, they're connecting, and they're becoming longer, those molecules. And during that polymerization process, the bitterness is going to be reduced, and it's going to add silkiness to the wine, becomes much more soft on the palate when you drink it. If you've ever opened a bottle of Cabernet Sauvignon, that was just a couple of years old, you might notice that it can be very bitter and it doesn't have that softness. It has more of a flavor profile or a feel in the mouth that's very aggressive. So we're looking to reduce that during that aging process. We're going to get some color shifts during the aging process as well. Red wine is going to turn more garnet color or brick color. And what's happening is the color molecules in the wine, those are actually falling out of the wine and collecting on the side of the bottle. If you've ever opened a bottle of wine that's been aged for a period of time, you'll see a line of color down on the bottom where that wine was sat for an extended period. And that is the molecules of pigment falling out of the wine, and the wine is getting lighter. Now, on the opposite side of the spectrum, white wines that you age for an extended period of time, they will start to develop a darker color or a deeper yellow color or a deeper golden color, and that is the wine going through the natural aging process. Pretty cool, huh? Sediment in wine, as I was just talking about, the sediment in wine is the stuff that collects at the bottom of the bottle. I don't recommend storing your wine upright. You definitely want to have it lay down so that line of color is going to appear on most red wines when you lay them down for an extended period of time. And sediment, it's natural, it's harmless, it doesn't feel very great in your mouth, so I wouldn't recommend drinking it, but if you do, it's totally fine. It's not going to hurt you. Of course, it was in the bottle with the rest of the wine, so it's definitely not going to hurt you. And the sediment in the bottle is going to be indicative of aging, especially in red wines. And when you run into a wine that has been aged for a long time, you might want to think about decanting it and just putting it in a larger vessel, let some air hit it, let the sediment sink to the bottom again, and you pour it into your glass. Running it through a sieve, a very, very fine sieve, is also a good option. They sell all kinds of devices out there, so if you are someone who's thinking about storing wine for a while, get yourself one of those fancy devices like a Coravin or something like that, and that will help you with the sediment that does tend to build up during the aging process. Now let's talk a little bit about storing wine without a cellar. Let's be real. Most people don't have a climate-controlled wine cave in their house. I don't have a climate-controlled wine cave in my house. I have a little closet where I store my wine. I buy appropriately for the wines that I want to keep for a while, and most of the wines, as I mentioned at the top of the show, that I buy, I'm going to consume within a few weeks. So they can live in the closet, or in the case of the whites, they can live in the fridge for a week or two until I do eventually drink them. But for those of you who want to go through the process of storing some wines for a bit, here are the do's and don'ts of making that work out in the end. First things first is temperature control. We want to keep that area, if possible, between 55 and 65 degrees Fahrenheit. This is ideal, but I will say you can go a little bit warmer, but keep it steady. Keep the temperature steady. That's going to be the most important thing. Big temperature swings or fluctuations, those will have an effect on the wine. So if you have a basement, an interior closet in your home like me, or a wine fridge, these are all great ways to go about what I'm talking about. You can have a wine fridge and keep it at a stable temperature, even 65, 70 degrees, keep it at that temperature, and as long as it's stable, it's going to work. As I mentioned as well, you want to store your wine on its side, never stand the wine up. And the reason that we do this is if the wine has a cork, then that cork is going to dry out and it's going to let things into that bottle that you don't want in there, like oxygen. That would be bad for the wine and just completely negate the aging process. You want to keep light to a minimum, keep it covered, keep it in a box, keep it in a cupboard, wherever you're going to do it. Just keep light to a minimum. Avoid jostling or vibration, anything like that. Don't keep wine on the top of your fridge, for example, or or next to a furnace, or just keep it steady, easy, not in a place where there's a lot of vibration or fluctuation. And of course, as I said, keep it consistent in all of these things. Fluctuations in temperature, fluctuations in movement, light, things like that can absolutely damage the wine. So keep it consistent. Don't store wine in your kitchen or your garage. Those places get too hot. Although it doesn't feel like it, those places get too hot. Again, don't keep it upright, and don't age wines that aren't meant to be aged. I gave you the list a few minutes ago, so if you need to get back up there and refamiliarize yourself with that list, please do. And of course, you can just go online and ask if it's appropriate to be aged. A bonus tip, a small wine fridge, they're not that expensive. A small wine fridge, even one that holds 8 to 12 bottles, you're talking about less than $100 in some cases, so find a place where you can put it. If you have the fridge, you can put it out in the garage, of course. You just don't want your box of wine sitting out in the garage. But if you have a little mini fridge that you can keep it stored at cellar temperature, 55 to 65 degrees approximately, that is a great thing to do, and it's an inexpensive way to do it. If you have any questions about that, you can always feel free, and I'll say this about any of my episodes. If you're listening and you have a question about something, reach out to me, shoot me an email, cheers@thewineguy.vin. I'm happy to answer it. I'm happy to give you some free advice. If you ever wanted to learn more about wine, of course, as you know, I do virtual tastings and things like that, so we can sit down and have a really, really in-depth conversation about what to do, and I'm always happy to help you consult. But if you have just a quick question when it comes to this, that, or the other, shoot me an email and I'll be happy to answer that for you. So, how long to age a wine and when do we open it? That is the ultimate goal, is we want to get this open. I will say, disclaimer, everybody, disclaimer, this is not an exact science. I cannot tell you, without seeing a vintage year, a place, a grape, things like that. I can't tell you specifically how long to age a particular bottle of wine, but these are some general guidelines. If we're talking about wine style, let's talk about the wine style and then I'll let you know. Beaujolais Nouveau. We mentioned it a little bit earlier. Beaujolais Nouveau, you need to drink that immediately. So that's going to be bottled, sometime in October, November, maybe December at the very, very latest. You want to drink that before June of the following year. That is meant to be enjoyed right away. Sauvignon Blanc, you don't want your Sauvignon Blanc to be any more than 2 years old. So please go ahead and drink that right away. Pinot Noir, you've got 3 to 5 years generally speaking, on Pinot Noir. Of course, I've enjoyed some great Pinots that were a lot older than that, but it has to be made in a very, very specific way for it to last that period of time. Merlot, you've got 3 to 7 years, again, approximately. Cabernet Sauvignon from Napa or Bordeaux, 7 years is a great starting point, up to 20 years on wines from those regions. So definitely something you can lay down for a while. Barolo, 10 to 25 years you can sit on those. Not that you're necessarily going to, but you can. There's always a curve in there as well. Is it 11 years or is it 22 years, etc. We don't know until we try it. And that is part of the fun, in my opinion. I've got a 1980 Pinot Noir sitting in my aging cupboard right now. And will I ever open it? Maybe not. Is it drinkable? Not 100% sure, but it's fun to say that we're sitting on a bottle of Pinot Noir from the Burgundy region, from the year 1980. So, more than 40 years old. It's pretty cool. Vintage champagne, 10 to 20 years again. Riesling, depending on wheres and the whens and the acid and things like that. A German Riesling can last up to 30 years in storage when stored well. And great ports, Madeira, things like that, sherries can last 20 or more years. Really, really, really good. But here's the key. What's my motto, everybody? My motto is you drink what you like. And I'll expand on that and you say you drink your wine when you want to enjoy it. If you like the brightness of a young cab with high acidity and high tannins, that's not my jam, but it might be yours. And if that is the case, then you go ahead and do that. If you like the funky, earthy aromas of a 15, 20-year-old Bordeaux, and that is your thing, then I absolutely recommend doing that. All right, so let's talk about tasting some of these wines and some general guidelines on how you want to enjoy a wine that has been aged for an extended period of time. As I mentioned, decanting will need to be done in some of these cases, and it's going to be about the sediment. It's not about really oxygenating them or wafting off any bad aromas or things like that. It's really, you want to separate them from the sediment that is going to be in the bottle of wine, especially from reds. Glassware, you want to use a glass with a larger bowl to it, something that you can really gather all of the aromas in the glass. You want to swirl it gently, and aged wines can be very, very delicate, so you want to be very gentle with them. The first sip, you want to give it time, allow it to come together in your glass. It might seem shy or muted at first, but over time in the glass, it's going to open up and it's going to blossom. Foods that you can pair with aged wines, either red or white. Mushroom dishes. Mushroom risotto, for example, is a great example of a food that would pair extremely well with an aged Cabernet Sauvignon or Barolo or Barbaresco. Really, really tasty. Pinot Noir is a good example of that as well. Roasted chicken, hard cheeses, any braised meat, braised game, maybe some elk or buffalo or something like that, lamb, definitely do well with aged wines. So, I've gone on long enough. So, do you need to cellar or age wine? Absolutely not. In a lot of cases, that's already done for you. If you are buying your wine from a reputable wine merchant, they're going to do you the favor of aging that wine for you. So it's ready to drink a lot of times right out of the gate. And again, if you are shopping for wine at one of those places, a reputable place, not a grocery store. If you're shopping at a reputable place, they're going to be able to tell you how much longer you can sit that bottle down and it still be viable in the glass. We just need a little bit of patience. We need a dark corner and the right bottle of wine. And again, if you have any questions regarding what that might be, I'm always happy to answer. Shoot me a message. Nick, will this wine, it's a blah, blah, blah from this region, this is the year, and so on. How much longer will it last in the bottle? I'm happy to give you that advice, and I appreciate you listening. That's my gift to you for listening to this show. Aging wine is really a great pleasure. One of the pleasures of wine appreciation, it's like watching one of your favorite movies, over and over again, and it gets better with time. You pick up a new nuance or you hear a new line, that sticks with you, or a subplot, that you didn't catch the first time around, things like that. So it really is a fun thing to do, and I enjoy doing it. If you've got a special bottle stashed away, pull it out, check the label, and, maybe plan a dinner around it. And I would love to hear about your experience with that bottle. Give us some details. Spill the tea for us. What did you eat? Tell us about the bottle and your tasting notes. You can share that with me on any of my socials, shoot me an email, or just go ahead and put a little note, a little comment here with this video. I would appreciate it. Again, for more details about the tastings that I do, more educational things that I do, wine guidance, things like that, please reach out to me at thewineguy.vin, thewineguy.vin, and I would be happy to help you as much as I possibly can. So until next time, friends, keep wondering and wondering. Thanks for being here. Take care. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Pour and Explore. I'd love to hear your thoughts, your stories, or your questions, so you can drop me a line at cheers@thewineguy.vin. That's cheers@thewineguy.vin. Or let's connect on TikTok, Instagram, or Facebook. Grab those links on my website at thewineguy.vin. Until next time, let's keep wondering and wandering. Cheers, everyone.